Hello, in this video I am going to show how we can create the DMN models using JBPM. The DMN, which stands for Decision Model and Notation, is one of the notations that JBPM has started to support recently. So let's see how we can create that and execute it in JBPM engine. To start with, let's go ahead and create a project for that. So let me name the project as BMI because in this example I will be showing how actually we can calculate the body mass index, the BMI for a person. So let's name that as BMI, and we can specify the group ID and the artifact ID. So let me call the group ID as com.bmi and the artifact ID as calc, and the version as 100. And let's go ahead and create the project. And the project is getting created. So once we have got the project created, when we go into the add asset option, we will see that there is a new type of asset that's being supported, which is called DMN. And so let's add this type of asset now, and let me call that as BMI. That's going to be the name of the DMN model. And the editor has now opened the DMN model, and on the left side of it we can see that there are different types of artifacts that are actually supported by DMN. So we will be using most of these artifacts for this particular example. And as I mentioned, so we will be determining the body mass index for a person using this DMN model. And as you know already, the body mass index is going to be based on the height and the weight of a person. So height and weight are going to be the two input data for this particular DMN model. So let's start defining that. Let's call the first input data as height, and let's create another input data and let's call that as weight, and we're going to use these two parameters to determine the BMI. So in order to determine the BMI, let's use the DMN decision artifact. So let me put that here, and we want to feed these two parameters as an input for this particular decision. So let's connect them using the information requirement, and let's call the actual decision logic to determine the BMI as find BMI. So I'm naming it as find BMI. And if you hover over this find BMI, actually we will see an edit option. So once I hit the edit option, the editor opens up a page where we can define the different types of expressions using which we can calculate the BMI. So if I click this select expression box, I get the different types of the logical types of expressions that we can actually define as a part of the BMI model here. So to start with, I'll use the context expression type, and also we will see in action all the other expression types, the different logical expression types in action in the next few minutes. To start with, let's use the context, and let's name this context as BMI score, because in order to determine the category of BMI to which a particular BMI index lies, we should be knowing the BMI score first. So, and the BMI score is actually going to be based on a simple formula that is actually used for calculating the BMI. So I'm defining the context as BMI score, and it's going to be a number. That's the return type of this BMI score. And in here we can actually invoke a specific function. So we will define a function first, and then we can invoke that function here. The function is going to be having the formula that is going to be used for calculating the BMI. So let me save this model for now, because we will define the function first and then invoke it here. So let's go back to the model and say that we are going to use a function, and the function can be actually defined as a part of the DMN business knowledge model. So let me take the business knowledge model here, and then let's say it's going to be having the BMI formula in it. Let's say BMI formula, and we can connect this BMI formula to the decision to say that this is the formula which we are going to use as a part of this decision. So let me save this model, and when I go in there, I can actually say I want to invoke that particular function. So, and the name of the function we can specify here. So I named the function as BMI formula there, for instance, okay, here also on the left we can see the different elements that are there as a part of the DMN model. So when I went back to the DMN model, I had specified the formula or the function name as the BMI formula. So that's what I need to invoke here. So I'm giving the exact same name here, and that particular function is going to be based on the height and weight. So let's go to the function back again, and let's define what are all the parameters that it's going to be based on. Let's call that the first parameter is going to be height, and the data type of that is going to be a number. Let me name it as H. And then the second parameter is going to be based on weight. So let's name it as W, and then let's say the data type as number. So this particular formula is going to be based on two attributes, H and W. And the formula for determining the BMI is going to be the weight divided by height squared, so which can be specified as a part of the field expression. So what we have here is a type of expression, mathematical expression, which we can use here, which is called field, friendly enough expression language. So I'm defining that using the field language, and this needs to be multiplied by 1000, and we would be interested only in the first decimal digit. So I'm going to use another function here, which is called the decimal, which is an inbuilt function provided by field, and I'm going to use consider only the first decimal digit that's going to come out of this particular calculation, which is weight divided by height squared multiplied by 1000. And then it should consider only the first decimal point. For instance, if I get the value of this to be let's say 18.524, then we would get the output of this particular expression as just 18.5. Okay, so now that we have defined the function, let's save the function here, and also we can specify what's the output of this particular, the data type of this particular function going to be. So we can either leave it as undefined, or we can specifically say that it's going to be a number. So let's say it's a number for now, and then save it. And let's go back to the context that we have actually defined there. So here is where we are going to invoke that particular function called BMI Formula, which is going to take two parameters. Just to recap, it's going to be H and W. So let's come back here and say that the value of H that we have defined as an input for that particular function is going to take the attribute called height, which is going to come as an input to the DMN model. So again, going back to the DMN model, so we have height, which is going to come as an input to the find BMI decision, and we want to actually pass on this height parameter to the variable called H, which is actually an input for the function called BMI formula. So going back to the context, the formula is expecting a parameter called H, to which I'm going to pass in the incoming variable, which is called, or the input data, which is called height. And in order to specify the height, I can choose the expression as literal expression, and I can simply type in the name of the input data, which is going to be height. And as we had defined the BMI formula to be based on height as well as weight, we can add the second parameter here and say what is the value of that parameter going to be. So let me say insert below, and the second parameter is weight, and it's of data type number, and the value of the variable or the parameter W is going to be the variable weight, which is coming as an input. So I'm specifying that as weight. So once the control comes here, for any given height and weight, it will be passed on as an input to this particular formula invocation, which is going to take in two parameters, H and W. So the incoming value of height will be assigned to this particular to this particular variable called H, and the value of weight input data will be assigned to W, and that would actually internally be used to calculate the BMI. So once we have calculated the BMI score, the next step is to determine what category the particular person belongs to for a given BMI score. And for that, let's add one more row below and say that we would be determining the BMI category, for instance. and the data type of that is going to be a string, because we are going to say what category is that particular index corresponds to. For instance, the category could be something like underweight, overweight, obese, and so on and so forth. And for that, actually, we are going to now use a decision table, because a particular BMI index could be in a particular range, and if it belongs to that particular range, then we will determine what is the category of that particular BMI index. So let's use a decision table for that. And the moment I add a decision table, it's going to automatically create a BMI category, because that's the expected output that we have defined here, and the input is actually going to be based on the BMI score. So we can simply name it as the BMI score, because that's the calculated value that we wanted to feed in as an input here. So it's going to be exactly named as BMI space score, and the data type of that is number, as we know here. So that's going to act as an input here, and based on that, let's say we will determine what is the category. So I have the set of actual values or the index to category mapping with me, so I'll directly start using that. So if the value of BMI is less than 18.5, then the category is going to be called as underweight, for example. And similarly, we can start adding the next set of values. So I'll say insert below the next value, and if the BMI range is between including 18.5 and up to 25, which means from 18.5 for any score that lies between 18.5 and 24.9, the category is going to be normal weight. So as I mentioned, so we have the inclusivity specified as a part of this symbol, and up to 25 is specified as a part of this parenthesis. And then let's go ahead and define the next category here, which is 25 to 30, so which is inclusive of 25 and up to 24.9 is called as overweight, for example. Let me define that here. And the last category is going to be the obese category, which is anything which is greater than or equal to 30. So let's add in that. And that's all. So we have defined the BMI score calculation using a formula, and the formula is actually invoked here using the invocation expression type. And then the output of that, the calculated value of BMI, would finally be used to determine the BMI category, especially this particular logic has been defined with the help of a decision table. So this completes actually the modeling of the BMI calculation DMN model. Now that we have modeled the whole thing, actually we can go ahead and test whether we are able to get the expected values out of this defined DMN model. In order to do that, we can go back to the project level and start adding something called as a test scenario. A test scenario is something using which we can feed the input to the DMN model. The runtime will evaluate the DMN model using the input that we feed as a part of the test scenario, and then it will provide the calculated value as an output. So let's call this as BMI test, and we are going to use the DMN model, the DMN asset that we have defined so far. So let's go ahead and choose that here, BMI DMN, and say OK. Okay, so there seems to be some compilation error because there's something with the same name. Okay, let's go back and see what is in there. Let me do a refresh. Okay, I don't see anything with the same name here. Okay, let's give some other name. Not sure what's the reason which has created this conflict. So let's go back and let me add the test scenario, and let me call that as BMI test scenario, and let's use the DMN model called BMI DMN and say OK. Okay, retrieving the DMN model has failed. Make sure the DMN asset does not produce any compilation errors. Oh, okay, I see. So there is a compilation error. So let's go back to the model and let's test it out. Okay, there are no errors. Let's see, view alerts. Let's clear it up. There are no errors here as well. Then I'm not sure why is it complaining about that. Okay, let's try it once again. BMI test scenario is going to be based on BMI.dmn, and here we go. Okay, I think there was something that was there on the cache. I think that has created the problem. So all what I've done here is just do a refresh here, which actually rebuilds the model, and as a result of that, whatever error it had was gone. Okay, so now that the test scenario has got generated automatically with all the attributes, so as per the model that we have defined, we have height and weight that's going to come as input, so that's why these two are part of the given part. And then the expected output out of that is going to be the find BMI and the value of that. So all what we need to do is to define the test case here. So let's say the height is going to be, let's say for example, 172, something like that, and the weight is let's say 40, which means this is in centimeters, this is in kgs. So the person is relatively tall, but it's underweight, so we would obviously expect the result to be underweight in this case. And so let's define that here and save the test scenario, and we can execute the test scenario using the execute option here. So let me hit that, and we are getting a failure here. Basically the test has failed because if we see here, yes, the BMI score that we've got is 1.4 and the category that was determined was underweight, which is correct, but the value what we have here is the expected value is underweight, whereas the returned value is a combination of both the BMI score as well as underweight. So now we've got to go back to the model, and then we need to correct the return type that we are expecting. So we are expecting the return type to have only the value, the category, the BMI category, which is underweight, and we don't want both the score and the underweight and the category to be returned here. So let's go back to the model and let's edit the model and see what is the return type that we have defined here. So if I close all these things, we can actually see it here, the result. Okay, so the result has not been specified, so there is no explicit result type that has been specified. As a result of that, the complete output from the decision table, which is these two columns, are actually coming as output. So what we need as output is primarily the BMI category alone. So let's say it's going to be a literal expression, and it's going to be BMI category alone. So let's define that here and then say save it, and we can go back to the test scenario and let's try to re-execute the test scenario, and still the output doesn't seem to match. Let's try it out once more. Okay, here we go. Now we can see that the test scenario has passed 100% because it applied this calculation, and as we had seen few minutes back, the BMI score was just 1.4, and as a result of that, it automatically got categorized as underweight. So we can add more test scenarios like this. Let me add one more scenario. Let's say the person's height is 172, but his weight is, let's say, 70, which is relatively a decent weight. So let's say it should be maybe normal. Let's see if we have a normal. Okay, we have the category called normal weight. So let's put in that here, normal weight, and let's save this model, the test scenario, sorry. Let's execute it, and we can see that, oh, okay, it's still calculating that to be underweight. I think there's something wrong with the formula then. Let me go back to the formula and let's see the value here. Oh, okay, I think this should be this is fine. So let's check what's the BMI calculation formula. BMI calculator. Okay, so let's feed in the values here and see what's the output that we get. Height is, so weight is, let's say 70, and height in centimeters is 172. The BMI should be coming in as 23.7. Okay, so that means I think we got to add one more zero here and save it. All right, let's go back and test it now. Let's refresh the model and let's test it. Okay, here we go. So now both the tests have got executed. So the error that we had got for the normal weight category was because of the fact that something was wrong with the formula. Basically, I missed out a zero. And now that we have defined the correct formula, we can see that both these tests have run through successfully. So when the weight was 40, it was determined correctly as underweight, and when the weight was 70 and the height was 172, the DMN model executed and calculated the weight correctly and determined the BMI category as well correctly. So that's why we can see that both the test scenarios have run and both have passed, and that's why we can see that there is a 100% passage here. Let me just show you something just to see that how the test report shows when the output doesn't match. So when I execute this one now, we can see that it shows that 50% of the tests were successful and the 50% was failure, and the failed one was here, which is highlighted in red color. So if I go back and correct that as I had done a few minutes back and save it again, and when I run it again, now we will see that the tests have passed fully. Okay, so with that, actually we have defined the BMI DMN model, and we have also defined the BMI test scenario. I think now it's time to go ahead and execute this BMI DMN model directly by using the key server APIs. So let's deploy this first. So let me go ahead and deploy this project. So the build is happening and the deployment has happened now. It's successful. So let's go ahead and now see whether the deployment is listed down here. Yeah, so here we have the calc model, and we have the calc container ready. So let's go ahead and execute this directly using the REST APIs of the key server. So as a part of the key server docs, the Swagger docs, we can see that there is a separate section called DMN models. So if you go in there, we can get the list of all containers that has the DMN models as a part of that. So let's go for try it out and give the container ID and get the list of all DMN models that are there as a part of this particular container. So here we can see that the moment I provide the container ID, get back the list of all elements that are there as a part of the DMN model. So we can see that this is the namespace and this is the model name, and the inputs are going to be height and weight. So these are the input data IDs. So all of that is actually specified, and then the model is going also having a decision, so that is also depicted here. Now let's go ahead and use the other API to actually execute this DMN model using the key server APIs. So let me take these two, the model namespace as well as the model name, because these two are required as an input for the other API. So this is the API. Server containers, container ID DMN, but it's going to be a post request. It says evaluates the decisions for the given input. So let's go there and choose the content type as application JSON and then say try it out. So we got to specify the DMN model namespace as well as the model name. So we've chosen JSON. So let me go and take the sample JSON that I have prepared already, and let's specify that here. Let's go to the edit option here. Okay, and let me specify this. So the model namespace is something that we will take in from here. The namespace is this. Let me copy that and put it here. And then the model name is going to be BMI. So let's take that and feed it here. And then the height and the weight. So let me give the same values so that we know what we are expecting as the output from this one. So the DMN context, the remaining part of the JSON model is going to specify the DMN context, because that's what we have as an input for this particular execution. So we have specified that. So let's go ahead and execute and see if we get the expected output out of this. Execute. There's something wrong. Okay, the container ID is missing. So the container ID is calc 100. So let me provide that and execute it. And here we go. So we've got the expected output here, which is the normal weight. That's the result out of this particular execution. So just to change and see if it works, when I give it as 40, in the test scenario we got it as underweight. So we should be getting the same response as a part of this API call as well. So when I execute this, I go down. Okay, so we get the response as underweight. Okay, so this completes the demonstration of how we can build the DMN models and execute them using test scenarios, as well as using the DMN APIs that are available as a part of the key server APIs that I had shown just now. Thank you for watching this video.